Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we are continuing from where we left off yesterday, Bhagavad Gita introduction. I believe we read almost 50 paragraphs. There are maybe another 12 paragraphs or something like that, and then Gita Mahatmya. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, yesterday Pyarimohan Prabhu read until the Urdhva Moolam verse. He read that particular paragraph. And then I think today we are reading from the where it says the Lord suggests. So anyway, there is a verse that Srila Prabhupada has in this section. So why not just recite this verse? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Nirmana Jita Sangadosha.
Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosha.
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama.
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama.
Dvandvair Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Sangair.
Dvandvair Mukta Sukha Dukkha Samnair.
Gacchantya Padamavyayam Tat.
Gacchantyamuda padamavyayam tat.
Would anyone like to chant, please?
Nirmana moha jita sangadosha.
Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosha.
Adhyatma nitya vinivarta kama.
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama.
Dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha sanyair.
Dvandvair Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Sangair.
Gacchantyamuda padamavyayam tat.
Gacchantya Padamavyayam Tat. Anyone else would like to chant?
Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha.
Nirmana Moha Jita Sanga Dosha.
Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama.
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama.
Dvandera vimukta sukha dukkha sabgnir.
Dvandvair Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Samnair.
Gachanti amudha padam avyayam tat.
Gacchantyamuda Padamavyayam Tat. Any more brave souls?
Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha.
Nirmana Moha Jita Sanga Dosha.
Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha.
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama.
सुखदुःखसंज्ञैर्
द्वन्द्वैर्विमुक्ता सुखदुःखसंज्ञैः
सुखदुःखसंज्ञैर्
गच्छन्त्यमूढा पदमव्ययं तत्
गच्छन्त्यमूढा
गच्छन्त्यमूढा
पदमव्ययं
पदमव्ययं तत्
तत्. Okay, thank you. The Lord suggests that we attain the spiritual world in the following manner. That Padam Avyayam, or eternal kingdom, can be reached by one who is Nirmana Moha. What does this mean? We are after designations. Someone wants to become Sir, someone wants to become Lord, someone wants to become the president, or a rich man, or a king, or something else. As long as we are attached to these designations, we are attached to the body, because designations belong to the body. But we are not these bodies, and realizing this is the first stage in spiritual realization. We are associated with the three modes of material nature, but we must become detached through devotional service to the Lord. If we are not attached to devotional service to the Lord, then we cannot become detached from the modes of material nature. Designations and attachments are due to our lust and desire, our wanting to lord it over the material nature. As long as we do not give up this propensity of lording it over material nature, there is no possibility of returning to the kingdom of the Supreme, the Sanatana Dhamma. That eternal kingdom, which is never destroyed, can be approached by one who is not bewildered by the attractions of false material enjoyments, who is situated in the service of the Supreme Lord. One so situated can easily approach that supreme abode. So we have seen in this introduction, Srila Prabhupada is gradually building up to this particular point. This introduction is actually wonderful. This is something Srila Prabhupada dictated. You can still find this introduction probably Prabhupada Vani and other with, or if you have these CDs. Very nice dictation that Srila Prabhupada had, and which was typed and edited into this form. So, and it is how many pages? Does anyone remember in the book how many pages this is?
20.
You don't have to look, but I'm curious if anyone remembers. 32 pages at least in the editions that I have. Pretty much I think in small and big editions, it's kind of 32 pages. 32 pages of introduction. Very nice introduction. A lot of times we skip introduction and jump to the verses. I'm glad we are reading introduction as well. Very nice introduction. And several things have been discussed. Srila Prabhupada talks why this another edition of Bhagavad Gita is required. He talks about the three features of the absolute truth. He talks about 5 aspects, 5 things that are discussed in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Then he talked about demigod worship. Now he's talking about the abode of the Supreme Lord. So we may think, why did Srila Prabhupada talk about demigod worship? What was the conclusion that he come to by describing those demigod worship?
What was the question again, Prabhu?
When Srila Prabhupada described the aspect of demigod worship, what was he trying to relay to us?
That ultimately Krishna is the root of all of these demigods, so worshipping something lesser is not going to help you get to the eternal kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's no permanent happiness. Demigods are also dependent on Krishna.
And even if you go to the demigod's kingdom, it's not permanent, you know.
Exactly. Wonderful. Yes. That's the point. That's a key point is, why do we want to go to these higher states of life? Because we are suffering. And we want to make a solution to these problems And we seek help from these demigods to solve these problems. But look, even if you seem to have a solution, it's not permanent. And there's no such thing as a permanent solution that even demigods can give us. Even if you go to their planets, even that is temporary. So an intelligent person, if we really want to have a permanent solution, then we need to look for the real happiness. And that real happiness is in the spiritual world. And if that's the case, then how do we go there? Naturally, we are looking for something better in this material world. Everybody is looking for some advancement from where they are. And this is how the material world is designed. Even if you go to work, continuous improvement, they want you to work more and better and more efficient. But how long does that work? At some point, we become old and they kick us out. They retire. They force us to retire. And they have so many means to get us out. And even if we go apply for more jobs, after a certain age, no one will hire us. When they find out we are old, they will not hire us because we have this big job and they have to pay us more money. Rather, they would hire a college kid. So even if we have made up to the top of the ladder, at some point they'll push us down. There's no way somebody will remain a CEO forever. No way someone will be the president forever. So this is the nature of the material world. There's no such thing as permanent situation. So therefore, we aspire to go to that place where there is permanent happiness. And how do we get there is the subject matter of discussion, next few paragraphs. So the very first quality that Krishna is demanding is nirmana moha, nirmana. And this comes up in a couple of places in the Bhagavad Gita. There's another place where the knowledge is described, what is true knowledge, and it starts with amanitvam adambhitvam. You must have read this in Ishopanishad as well in Jiva Mataji was giving the classes where it's described what is the true knowledge, and Prabhupada cites the verse from Bhagavad Gita. So here also we see the same thing, nirmana moha. What does mana mean?
Honor.
Honor?
Yes, mana means honor. And nirmana means?
Dishonor?
Without honor.
Yes, nirmana moha, amanitvam, nirmana moha. So those who do not desire these things, those who do not desire, it's a compound here, nirmana and moha, compounded together. But in general, amanitvam adambhitvam. And the same principle is also stressed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Does anyone know where?
Amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari.
Yes. Amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. That person who doesn't expect honor, but he gives honor, he has the ability to chant. He is kirtaniya sadahari. That person can chant the holy names of the Lord continuously. So we can see here there are so many qualifications that are required for many job postings, right? They publish the postings for different jobs. If you want to apply for a solution architect, Ragasindhu Prabhu, you need to have Azure and AWS certification, right? So now Krishna is also giving a job profile. You want to come to my planet? You want to join me? This is the job profile that you need to have. And which is the very first thing in the checklist, the very first level of interview that happens is they look at the resume, and on the resume, the first qualification is nirmana moha, yes, nirmana, amanitvam, amanina, so many of these things, right? In one sense, it may be difficult, but in other sense, look, it almost seems like we don't need to have anything, right? No big certifications and all these things. Krishna is asking for something simple. Be a simple person. Nirmana moha. And Prabhupada is saying we all have these designations that we are after. Sir, Lord, and we put our designations next to our username on LinkedIn. And I remember in India, on the houses, you will have the name of the person, right? And beneath that name, what do you have? Beneath the nameplate, you have the education qualifications and his job title. They'll put. So these designations, what is the definition of bhakti?
Sarvopadi vinirmuktam.
Yes, can you say the whole thing?
Tatparatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate.
Yes. Bhakti means sarvopadi vinirmuktam. All the upadis, all the designations, a person must be free from those designations. And this is what Srila Prabhupada is saying here. We are after these designations. But the very basic definition of bhakti, Rupa Goswami explains, is sarva upadi vinirmuktam. All other upadis, all other designations are given up. And that is what here Srila Prabhupada is also mentioning. Give up all the designations and jita sangha dosha, this fault of this faulty association of this material world, jita, one must conquer. Material world is very, very tempting, extremely tempting, material world. So many things are put in front of us. And the last snare of Maya is thinking we are God. Even after being detached from the material world, then that gives a sense of accomplishment that now I'm not attracted to the material world. And then that will also actually give us some siddhis as we practice any yoga, either bhakti yoga or Ashtanga yoga. There's a detachment developed, and we have this sense of detachment and even some shaktis that may manifest. And the person will think, now I am God. And Prabhupada said that is the last snare of Maya. So the Mayavadis are after this thing. Now I gave up all these designations, but now I am God because I become one with God. So even that designation has to be given up by the mood of becoming a servant of the Lord. And these designations are because of kama. That's why vinivritta kama. Adhyatma nitya means this person is situated in the transcendental knowledge, on the transcendental path, not the material attachment and material designations. And vinivritta kama is free from all these lusty desires, wanting to lord it over. And sukha dukkha sannaihi dvandvaihi vimuktaha. The dualities of happiness and distress one must be freed from. What does this mean, to be freed from the dualities of happiness and distress? Does that mean we should never feel happy? Because Krishna is saying we should be free from designation, these dualities.
It should be dhira.
What does that mean?
Prabhu, we should be dhira.
Yes, Mataji, could you explain with
What
some
does
example?
dhira mean? He's asking.
So you should not be swayed by the happiness or distress and continue to do your service.
Yes, perfect, wonderful. That's the whole point. It's not that we see Prabhupada happy, we see devotees are happy when they're chanting. It doesn't mean we should not feel happy. The Mayavadis will actually think, they challenge Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you are a sannyasi. You're supposed to be studying Vedanta. You should be sober, dhira, dhira. Why are you dancing, jumping up and down, Hare Krishna? Right? So this means we should not let material happiness, material pleasures, or material miseries affect our devotional service. Sometimes we may have some material accomplishments and everything. We feel so happy. We don't even chant our rounds on that day because we got a promotion or we got something. Yes, we are saying this is Krishna's mercy, but we are relishing that happiness so much that we forget to serve Krishna. We forget to make an offering to Krishna. we just become absorbed as being the doer and the enjoyer of that fruit, instead of designating Krishna as the enjoyer of that fruit. So we can feel happy for the mercy of the Lord and how Krishna is the one who enabled us to accomplish something, but we should do our service. It should not be an obstacle to our service. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada, he may go into ecstasies, but if those ecstasies are an obstacle for his service, he will control his emotions and he will continue his service. Because devotees, they don't want to let even their pleasure, their enjoyment of Krishna obstruct their service to Krishna. So that, even at a spiritual level, even if it may be spiritual happiness, but if they have a service to do, Srila Prabhupada, if he has to give a class, but he's feeling emotionally attached to Krishna, he will put those emotions on the side and then he'll give the class. So a devotee is, the main thing is service. He'll continue. And even if there are some miseries, Srivas Pandit, when his child leaves his body, his son, in order not to interrupt Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he will not give that news to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Mahaprabhu is engaged in Kirtan. Devotees were doing Kirtan, but there's a death in the family, and he will not give that information so as not to interrupt. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu finds out. I mean, this is an extreme example, but in our case, we may have some miseries, some difficulties. There may be some difficulties. So
Prabhu,
do we, yes.
Sukhe thako, dukhe thako, bol Hari bol.
Yes, wonderful, right? Whether you're in happiness or distress, always worship Hari. So this is the Sukha Dukkha Sangnair Vimuktaha. I'm giving this, very exalted examples, but at a simple level, we should not be swayed away, by so-called material happiness and distress, obstruct our sadhana, our whatever services we have that we are supposed to execute. And another one is Gacchanta Mudaha Padam Avyayam Tat. So those who are not bewildered, Amudaha, they go to this Avyayam Padam. Avyayam means eternal, inexhaustible. These eternal abodes. Material world is there, but it gets annihilated and created again and again. That spiritual world, it's eternally manifest, and in the subsequent verses, Srila Prabhupada describes more characteristics of this supreme abode. So next he states from Bhagavad Gita chapter 8, Avyaktokshara ityuktas tamahu paramangatim yam prapya na nivartante tadhama paramamama. So because it was mentioned here in 15.5 that this padam is avyayam. Avyayam is, inexhaustible, infallible also, could say. And here it is avyakta and akshara. Again, akshara conveys the idea of infallibility. But avyakta is unmanifested. Now, unmanifested means it is unmanifested to our present state. In the same 8th chapter, there is the description of manifestation, there's a description of unmanifestation, and a description of second level of unmanifestation. Brahma bhuvanaloka punaravartino Arjuna. Even if we go to the topmost planet in the material world is what?
Brahmaloka.
Brahmaloka. Even if we go up to the point of Brahmaloka, we have to come back. But here this word Srila Prabhupada is citing, Yam prapya na nivartante tadhama paramamama. Krishna is saying that abode having attained, you don't have to come back, that is my abode. Anything in the material world, we have to come back. Dust we come from, and dust we shall return to, right? These bodies are made of nothing but dust, transformation of dust into food grains, and through that food grains, actually the living entity is inside the food grains. And when we eat the food grains, then the living entity enters the body of male, and through semen it comes out and enters into the body of a woman, and there the child takes birth. But that grains are produced from Mother Earth. So then ultimately we'll go to the graveyard, or the body is burnt and mixes into Panchabhutas. So this material body also should be returned, given up. We get this body, we should give it up. We'll have a job, one day we must retire. We may get married, but one day in the form of either death or taking sannyas, we separate. Children come into the family, they grow up, they go away. Corporate ladder we climb, and we must come back. So better be humble, because when we grow up, when we rise above the corporate ladder and we offend people while we step over them to get up there, but one day we have to come back on the same ladder and they may kick us again. So better have that nirmana.
Even in snakes and ladders, you get to the 99th spot and then there's a huge snake and you go all the way down.
Yes, thank you, Sugopi. Everybody must have played this game when you are kids. Snakes and ladders, right? You go up, you must come down. But the beauty is there's one place, the supreme abode of Krishna. We don't need to worry anymore. Once we go there, it's a permanent situation. We don't need to be afraid who is going to snatch my belongings. We don't need to be afraid who will take over my job. New person is joining. Maybe he'll become the manager and I have to go away. All these things, no worries. Yam prapyana nivartante tadhama paramam mama. And that is the paramangatim. That is the supreme destination that we go to. So I was also saying there's another unmanifest. In the same 8th chapter, Krishna says that even this material creation as a whole, at one time it has to, at the end of Brahma's day, everything is unmanifest. And during Brahma's day, it becomes manifest again. So in one sense, there is also unmanifest and manifest state in the material creation. But he says beyond this manifest and unmanifested stages, there is another avyakta. There's another avyakta which is also akshara, which is also infallible. The material states are fallible. But this another transcendental, infallible avyakta state, that is the spiritual world. And we should hanker to attain that spiritual kingdom. And this is what Srila Prabhupada is suggesting here. And now some qualities were described. So you should have these qualities to be able to go to spiritual world. But there's something more that we may have that qualities for some time and then we may not have some other time. What is the ultimate thing that will take us? So there is a final examination. We must pass that final exam. And what is that final exam? And Prabhupada is saying here, next one may raise the question of how one goes about approaching that abode of the Supreme Lord. Information of this is given in the 8th chapter. It is said there, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati samadbhavam yati nasyatra sanshayah. Antakala. Antakala means that's the end time. Anta means last, kala means time. So the last moments we have in this particular body. This body has specific duration. We have certain number of breaths that we can breathe. Inhale, exhale. There's a specific count. And the counter is, it has to decrement, increment and decrement. So it will decrease with every tick, every breath. Those who are software engineers, while the breath equals to, not equals to the last breath. Or while the breath count not equals to whatever the allocated count, you go on with this world. But when that last breath happens, we'll be kicked out of this body. Done. We'll be thrown away from this body. And at that moment, then there's another code. If last breath, if the living entity's mental state equals to Krishna consciousness, then the flow chart has two paths. If the last breath's consciousness equals to Krishna consciousness, go back to spiritual world. If not, what happens?
Come back.
We'll be thrown into the material world again. So, antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. Smaran, we must remember Krishna in the time of death. So, everything that we do during this life is to support this last one statement in the code, that one line of code, whether the consciousness, last consciousness equals to Krishna consciousness. Everything else we do is to make that statement true. That's what our effort is. The entire life is for that purpose. Then, prayati samadbhavam. That person will come to me. Yati nastyatra sanshayah. There is no need to be doubtful about this statement that Krishna is making. He is giving this assurance. Even towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he gives this assurance to Arjuna. Surrender unto me, ma shuchaha. Do not worry. And this bhakti process is so wonderful. And Krishna takes the responsibility to take us even if we fail. If we go to some company, some industry, you join a job, this and that, if we fail, we get kicked out. But Krishna consciousness is so beautiful. Once we join, even if we fail, Krishna will still take care of us. He'll make us pass. Somehow or other, he'll make us pass. He is the best teacher. He'll never make us fail. Even if we make mistakes, he will give us some punishment. But finally, we'll pass the examination. So all we need to do is somehow or other get into this process. And once we get into this process, then he will make sure we will pass this examination. And Prabhupada, Krishna here is saying, Mad Bhavam, they'll attain my state, Mad Bhavam. What does this mean? And Prabhupada describes this Bhavam, Krishna's Bhavam, is constituted of Satchidananda, three things. Sat, Chit, and Ananda. What does Chit mean?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. Sat means eternal aspect, and Chit is knowledge, and bliss is Ananda. The Brahman state is the Sat state, Paramatma state is the Chit state, and Bhagavan is the Ananda, and actually it's incremental. So Paramatma state has Sat and Chit, Paramatma level of realization, and Bhagavan realization has Ananda, this bliss that we can experience by exchanging loving service with Krishna in his loving devotional service. So right now we don't have the knowledge of the spiritual world, but we should have faith that Krishna is describing this. Therefore, we must keep faith in this one. So all of the miseries that we have, Srila Prabhupada explains in here, that all the miseries that we have are because of the body. Right? The kleshas are given the body and the mind. Both the mind here is the material mind and material body. So either we have physical problems or mental problems. Both are made of matter. The subtle body, mind, intelligence, ego, is also made of matter. This body is also made of matter. So it's actually the material aspect that is giving us problems. The spirit soul is Satchidananda. Soul is always blissful. But what happened is right now we are in a dreaming state. The soul is thinking that I am this body. The more we get relief from this identity, the more we'll be able to be free from the material existence. we already experience some level of freedom now. Because of our purification of subtle body, we already experience some relief. There may be certain things we really take too seriously if we were not devotees. Say, suppose if you are unable to go to the movie of your favorite actor, we must have felt bad in our previous states of consciousness. Oh, I was not able to go to this movie. But after you become devotees, you don't even care about it. So the same thing that was giving problems is no more a source of problems after we become devotee. So similarly, this body is there after more advancement, then the body and the mind will not give problems to pure devotees. It may be there, but they're not absorbed in the body. So once the soul is completely liberated, it doesn't need a material body at all. The soul exists in a spiritual body. And that in that spiritual body, we can experience highest bliss. And that highest bliss is the Madbhavam that Krishna is talking about here. And in the next paragraph, Prabhupada is talking about the process of quitting the body. The process of quitting this body and getting another body in the material world is also organized. A man dies after it has been decided what form of body he will have in the next life. Higher authorities, not the living entity himself, make this decision. According to our activities in this life, we either rise or sink. This life is a preparation for the next life. If we can prepare, therefore, in this life to get promotion to the kingdom of God, then surely after quitting this material body, we will attain a spiritual body just like the Lord's. Now, this life is a preparation for the next life. So this is very, very important. Our body is actually being made. The blueprint is already there. Yamaraja and other devatas, they are making a blueprint of how our body will look like in the next life. And the interesting thing is, there are many tools that will show us different blueprints of our body. So today, I was looking at one of our friends' Facebook page, and she came for Bhakti Vriksha classes for brief time, and she always used to ask some challenging questions. Anyway, so I was looking at page, and eventually she didn't have devotee association, and she now has a dog. She is keeping a dog as a pet, and she became very attached to this dog now. And her Facebook post was, so she has a picture with a dog on one side, and then the dog and there's another picture of another dog on the other side. If I were a dog, how will I look like? And she has this picture of a dog. Then I was looking at it, and yes, that's what you will be if you are so attached to this dog. And her posts have become all about her dog, that, like when I talk to my dog, it barks back at me. She's speaking adult language. She's completely absorbed in these dog emotions. And now she puts this picture that how will I look like when I'm a dog? Like, sure, why not? Most likely that's what it is. That's what will happen, because this life is a preparation for next life. It's not that we should not be compassionate to pets. The point is, we should not bring our consciousness down to that level. Nowadays, we don't have human relationships anymore. And therefore, we keep a pet, which is nothing wrong. When people have pets, they can feed and do all those things. But remember that we are not these bodies. Even the pet is not what it is. We are spirit souls. And we must spend our life in Krishna consciousness. preparing our life for advancement in Krishna consciousness. And it is said our life is already, our next life is already being made. And the example, I believe this example is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, is it's just like when we are walking. When we are walking, we first set one foot and then take the other foot off the ground. It's not like we just jump with 2 feet and then we land with 1 feet. No, first we secure our step and then we'll raise this another step. That is the process when we walk, right? You go there, put it here, and then lift the back leg. And then we go on walking like that. So similarly, a soul's another body determined, and then the soul will leave this body and enter into another body. So therefore, that consciousness we have is very, very important, how we keep our consciousness. And this consciousness is very, very important so that it's just like everything that we experience, it will stick to us. It will stick to us. If some of you or any of you are sensitive to smells, my daughter is very, very sensitive. If she goes on the flight and there's this onion garlic they're serving, and you're like, oh my God, the smell, how do I get out? Even if you go to some place where there's onion garlic and she gets suffocated, and it actually sticks to the clothes, and you can feel it. So remember that it's just a subtle smell. You don't even see it. I mean, we don't see the smell, but we just feel it. Similarly, this consciousness, external consciousness that we have, it will also stick to the soul, and we have to get rid of it. And how do we get rid of it? Is by constantly engaging in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, these imprints, these are called also sanskaras. The more we are engaged in these material activities, it gets printed on our consciousness. It's like a virus that gets into the consciousness. And that virus will cause many, many problems. Just like we are staying away because of COVID. Why? We don't see COVID. None of us have seen COVID. But we know that when you go out, it will, affect us. So we put a mask so that the mask will filter. So Krishna consciousness is our mask. We have to get up in the morning, chant our rounds, do some Mangalarti, do some Arti, read, hear, offer bhoga, eat prasadam. So this is all the vaccination. This is the mask to protect our consciousness so that at the time of death, we are not affected by any of these things. And when we quit our body, our next stage of Krishna consciousness is in the spiritual world. Then we'll go back to the spiritual world. So next paragraph is a little big. I'll stop here. Any questions or comments before I move forward?
I have a question.
Yes, Gopi.
So even when someone reaches Brahman realization, like Krishna says in the verse, Brahmabhuta prasannatmana shochati nakangshati, they do achieve a state of happiness. What is the difference between that happiness and the happiness that's ananda when you have Bhagavan realization?
Yes, very, very good question, Gopi. So the happiness in Brahman is basically coming from the detachment of this material world and lack of miseries from this material world. It's so much relief. If we are, for example, now we have COVID situation. Now, say, for example, we are let go outside, there may be a sense of happiness because we are no longer bound. We are free. Similarly, when the prisoners are let go from the prison, they celebrate the freedom. Say when different countries got independence, they celebrate the attainment of freedom, right? So in this way, freedom from this material world is also freedom from the threefold miseries. And that also may give some happiness, but that happiness is insignificant compared to the happiness that is available in devotional service to the Lord. And but for devotees, even that Brahman state is like a hell. Kaivalyam narakayate tridashapura akasha pushpayate. Who says this? Gopal Bhatta Goswami's uncle, Prabodhananda Saraswati. Prabodhananda Saraswati. Even Kaivalya, which is this impersonal Brahman liberation, Kaivalyam narakayate tridashapura akasha pushpayate durdantendriya kala sarpa patali potkata damstrayate vishvam purna sukhayate. And he says all this happens because to the person who has gained the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When there is this mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so powerful, the happiness at the shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so powerful that even impersonal liberation is like hell. And the attainment of heavenly planets is like will o' the wisp. And the senses, they become like serpents whose fangs are broken. They cannot affect anymore. Vishvam Purna Sukhayate. In devotional service, that person who has received the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is feeling happiness everywhere. So that happiness in bhakti, even in the material world, is much higher than this state of happiness in the Brahman realization, because it's just mere abstaining from the material miseries. So there is no interaction with the Supreme Lord. So a devotee doesn't even want that. For a devotee, even that is like a hellish situation. Is that okay, Sugopi?
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments, any devotees from so far what we read?
I had a couple of comments, and
yes,
I liked something you said. One thing you said, sarvopadi vinirmuktam, right? So those are really material upadhis you're talking about, right? Because Purandara Dasa talks about dasanudasa upadhi, or padvi being like the highest upadhi, or dasanudasa being, greatest padvi, he says, so those upadhi, that's a constitutional position upadhi, but the other sarvopadi vinirmuktam is material designations or material upadhis, right?
That's correct. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
And then second, I liked your comment about that once you surrender to Krishna, Krishna will never let you fail, And it, I chuckled a little bit because I was thinking about the analogy that I've heard that once you get into Ivy League schools, there is a norm that they'll never let you fail. That nobody really fails in an Ivy League school. And I know that for a fact because I've known several kids who have not done so well, but they never failed, Somehow
really?
they will pass, yes. So that's like an unspoken norm that because an Ivy League school is considered, you have to be pretty, intelligent and of a certain category to get there in the first place. They never let you fail, once you get there. So I was just thinking that's like, once you surrender to Krishna, Krishna will never let you fail. Somehow or the other, he'll make you pass.
So Gopi, dear, do you hear that? She's in anxiety for her final paper.
No, don't be in anxiety. So Gopi, I've known much worse students than you. Ivy Leagues never let you fail. That's like an unspoken norm.
I was asking her, Sugopi, how is it going? So, you don't help me with my paper. You just keep asking me whether I'm done.
No, they might give you a C or maybe a little less than it, but you will pass. You will pass no matter what. They never give less than a C. They will make you pass. That's the beauty of getting to an Ivy League school. So I was just thinking, that's the beauty of surrendering to Krishna, that once you surrender, that he will never let you fail.
Yeah, actually Prabhupada says, once we surrender, we will be dragged to success. Probably this was a nectar of instruction, I believe. he says you'll be dragged to success. And so Krishna is so kind that once we take shelter of Krishna, he may punish us sometimes, if we don't behave, if we commit offenses and stuff. But ultimately, once we, make that vow, take shelter of Krishna, like a kind father, he will bring us there.
Mm-hmm. And to also add to your Sugopi's question and your answer, you were saying the being in Brahman versus being Bhagavan, I was also thinking, like, when you're in a noisy place or a chaotic place, maunam or silence gives you relief, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, that's why people prefer these quiet meditations to kind of bring some peace. But that is relief from noise, right? But kirtanam gives you like so much joy. That's the positive side of ananda, what I'm saying, like Bhagavan aspect, because kirtanam is it's transcendental sound. So maunam might give you relief, but kirtanam gives you joy, greater joy,
Yes, and not only that, but not only joy, maunam may temporarily abstain us from the desire, from other desires. For example, you gave the example of noise. Say another example of, doing sinful activities, right? Okay, you may abstain from them, but the tendency to do it, as soon as there's an opportunity, you again jump to do it.
Correct, yeah.
But if you positively engage in Krishna consciousness, even if you are exposed to it again, now the desire to do it is no longer there because the sinful tendency is being purified. So this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness, is not only we are protected from negativity, but we are developing immunity from further negative, from further contamination. So this is the beauty of bhakti.
Very good point. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji.
Anyone else have any? We have another 7 minutes. We could read another paragraph, or if you want to share something, you can go ahead. Okay, let me read the next paragraph then. As explained before, there are different kinds of transcendentalists: Brahmavadi, Paramatmavadi, and the devotee. And as mentioned in the Brahma Jyotir spiritual sky, there are innumerable spiritual planets. The number of these planets is far, far greater than all of the planets of this material world. This material world has been approximated as only 1/4 of the creation. Ekan Shena Stito Jagat. In this material segment, there are millions and billions of universes with trillions of planets and suns, stars, and moons. But this whole material creation is only a fragment of the total creation. Most of the creation is in the spiritual sky. One who desires to merge into the existence of the Supreme Brahman is at once transferred to the Brahma Jyotir of the Spirit of the Supreme Lord, and thus attains the spiritual sky. The devotee who wants to enjoy the association of the Lord enters into the Vaikuntha planets, which are innumerable, and the Supreme Lord, by his plenary expansions as Narayana with 4 hands and with different names like Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Govinda, associates with him there. Therefore, at the end of life, the transcendentalists think either of the Brahma Jyoti, the Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. In all cases, they enter into the spiritual sky, but only the devotee or he who is in personal touch with the Supreme Lord enters into the Vaikuntha planets or the Goloka Vrindavana planet. The Lord further adds that of this there is no doubt. This must be believed firmly. We should not reject that which does not tally with our imagination. Our attitude should be that of Arjuna. I believe everything that you have said. Therefore, when the Lord says that at the time of death, whoever thinks of him as Brahman or Paramatma or as the personality of Godhead certainly enters into the spiritual sky, there is no doubt about it. There is no question of disbelieving it. So this is this firm faith that we should have. And we kind of already discussed some of these points. And actually, this is the conclusion of the verse that we read, that Srila Prabhupada is continuing to describe. So this word, Ekanshena Stito Jagat, and also, Prabhupada is saying the material world is 1/4 of the spiritual creation. So then we may think in terms of physical space, right? But there is no such thing as physical space in the spiritual world, right? Actually, the space is created by sound. It's very complicated, but please try to understand so that we can distinguish between when we say it is 1/4, we have an apple, you cut into 4 pieces, then 1 piece versus 3 pieces. It is not like that. Because this material world is simply the physical space, as we are experiencing. But there is also something more than this physical space. Even space itself is dynamic. Suppose the space, even in the material world, in New York, the space is more expensive. The same space somewhere else, it may not be that expensive. It's a different quality of space. Then we may also have some space in someone's heart. We say, you always have a place in my heart. What does that mean? What does that mean? You always have a place in my heart. Have you ever wondered about that? What does that mean? Is that in our heart, we do some plastic surgery and put that person's, or give that to that person? Then we go from physical space to psychological space, to the mental space. And there is something higher, the spiritual space. And the Vaikuntha planets, those are the spiritual, that's the spiritual space. It doesn't occupy material space. So when Krishna is saying, Ekanshena Sthito Jagat, by his form of one of his Vishnu Tattvas, Mahavishnu, then he is maintaining all these material universes. And then he expands into Garbhodaka, Kshirodaka, Shai Vishnu, expands his Paramatma, and Ekanshena Sthito Jagat, he is maintaining this world by his one Amsha. So he has given a part of his spiritual consciousness to maintain this material world, to maintain all the living entities in the material world. So this is how we should say, when we say plane, there's a plane and planet. Planet comes from the plane. There's material plane, material planets, material consciousness. There's spiritual consciousness, spiritual plane, and spiritual planets. That's what we're talking about here, not the gross space that we are experiencing with these gross senses. This is something higher. So I'll stop here. Tomorrow's class will be 8.6. It starts with the Bhagavad Gita. 8.6 explains. That's where it will start. So any final comments, questions before we wrap up for tonight?
I find it very hard to understand how the spiritual world is without physical space. I still didn't quite get that, Prabhu.
Yeah. So, but what does it mean when you say you have, someone has a place in your heart? What do you mean?
But that means I have some affection for that person in my heart.
Yeah.
But how does spiritual world not having any space mean? I can't comprehend that so easily. Guess I have to go there to understand it.
Yeah. It's like a dreaming state. In the dream, your experiences are real.
Right. And so I am in a space, right? Even in the dream. Yeah.
You're climbing, and I have Spider-Man dreams, like you'll be jumping off the building, but you're floating, right? The experience is real, and you are existing. The Sat Shakti is there because you're existing. Chit Shakti is there. Chit Shakti is there because you're comprehending things are happening. Ananda is there because you're exchanging, you're having bliss. Sat, Chit, Ananda, all the 3 states are there in the dream.
Right, but there's no physical space, you're saying.
Yeah, no physical space, but it may be perverted. It's a perverted state.
Yeah, it's a perverted state.
But there is some space that you're experiencing. There is some knowledge you're interacting, and there's some bliss that you're experiencing. And you may be experiencing miseries also because it's not the true reality. It's virtual reality.
Right.
So those states exist. It's the more we are able to be free from material detachment, the more it starts making some sense, right? If you are too much entangled in the material thing, we say, come on, give me a break. It's a superstition. You are saying something. But as our senses become more refined and more pure, then we have new faculties of experience. With those new faculties, we're able to perceive things in a better way, right? When we put on glasses, we can see things properly. So armed with this spiritual knowledge, we experience a higher reality, right? Just like gulab jamun is relishable to us, but not to a pig, not to a hog. Why? Because we are in a higher state of mode of goodness. That's in the mode of ignorance. So if mode of ignorance, mode of passion, there's a difference in experience. Mode of passion, goodness, there's different in experience. And from mode of goodness to mode of transcendence, there's a difference in experience.
I see. Well, it's completely obvious to me. I can't comprehend it.
but you can comprehend the states from ignorance to passion, passion to goodness, right? So therefore, we believe that there's a higher state that we can experience when we go
right
there.
And I can comprehend what you said about the dream. There's no physical space.
Yes.
Like you said.
Yeah.
But that's a perverted non-space.
Yes.
I was also thinking about the concept of space in relation to what Prabhupada was saying. The physical space doesn't really matter on whether you're going to Goloka or not, because Brahmajyoti is much closer to Goloka, but so many impersonalists are there and they don't go from Brahmajyoti to Goloka. But he says someone who's in personal touch with the Lord goes to Goloka, and that person can be in this material world but still be closer to Krishna than someone is in Brahmajyoti. So personal touch isn't something physical. It's in relation.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yes.
You can be in that spiritual world right here also. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we'll
Thank you.
stop here unless anyone else, there are more comments. So thank you, all the devotees, for your participation. Rasraj Prabhu,
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Damodar Prabhu. Yes. Yes,
So
go ahead, Prabhu.
this is just on a lighter note that this space concept, I remember I had watched this Hollywood movie called Matrix.
Yes.
I don't know whether any people on the call have, but that has this
Is
similar
it the
concept of
blue? Did you
space,
take the
little
blue
bit
pill or the
different from
red pill?
physical space. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's the movie that has the blue pill and the red pill, right? No? I thought you take something and then you experience this reality or that reality. Matrix movie. Yeah. Yes, that's a good example. Thank you, Madhav Kanta Prabhu. Okay, thank you. Thank you, all the devotees, those who participated, those who are listening, Mati Priya Mataji, Geeta Mataji, and others. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Koti Vaishnav ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Tulsi.
Hare Krishna.